Your friends, your friends, radio friends again, radio friends again. We've got a lot to share.
Well, hello, good morning, and welcome to another edition of Radio Friends again, the 21st of March, 2025. We've got a nice group of guys already weighing in. Got Pete Solanas here, Tracy Carmen's here, Bill Rock, Ted Dalaku, Ed Bruder's here, Ron Pell, Bob Craig, Dave Nagel, the judge is here, Judge Harrigan, John Landry, Bob Marks, Russ Oasis, and Pat Sheehan. I don't know, Pat, where are you coming to us from this morning? You look like you're trapped in the car somewhere.
I am. I'm on my way to a different meeting that I have to get to, but I wanted to stop by and say hello.
Are you up north? Or are you down in? Are you down in Texas?
I'm in Texas, back in Texas now.
Thanks a lot for jumping on for a few minutes. But yeah, we were just talking offline a little bit about life expectancy or what happens to a lot of jingles if families don't hold on to them and they just go into the dumpster somewhere, which is unfortunate. But Tracy, oh yeah, I'm Steve Parker in Berlin. Tracy, what I was forgetting myself. Tracy, what I was wondering, what about like the Broadcasters Foundation of America? Is there a way that maybe they could know what you do? Because I would imagine they must go near a lot of people's families, perhaps, that have lost one. Maybe there's a way that, getting some information to them. I don't know if you could put something on their website or what, but that might be a way to get the word out.
Could be a conversation with TJ Lambert, who's always in here. I've worked with them. I do have a friend of mine who's collecting a grant from them at this point in time. They're very good at what they do. But yeah, I should mention to TJ. At one point, I was going to talk to Joel Denver about that, and I thought to myself, actually, I did mention it, and we never did anything further on it. I just had too many things going on at the time. The reality here is I've got so much materials in house right now. And my philosophy, and if I'm being redundant or verbose, please shut me up. But my philosophy is I'd rather have it under roof and not transferred than have it ending up in a dumpster somewhere.
Yep.
And I could make a full-time job out of transferring materials, and I would never get all the stuff done. Before the call, I was up in my attic going through some old 10.5-inch reels of stuff from WNDR in Syracuse I forgot that I had on reel that's never been transferred. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm going to drag these down. I still have, again, as John Landry would attest, I still have his stuff to finish.
Right.
And I've just bought another DAT machine, and I've got another one I bought in Dallas. Getting the machines to play the materials in working order is a bit of a challenge these days because DAT machines haven't been built since like 1985, maybe 90.
Tracy, how is the degradation of some of the sound on the tapes? I mean, how long, how far back can you go? I mean, some of the old tapes, have been stored in somebody's garage for a long time or whatever.
It depends on what the tape is made out of. I mean, I've got the transcription discs from WTIC that go back to the 1930s sitting in big wooden crates, and those are playable. Some of them have degraded. The reel-to-reel tapes, I find the ones that are troublesome are the ones from about 1970 to 75 because they took the whale oil, which was a lubricant, out of the tapes. So the tapes have turned to mud. You literally bake them. I bought American Harvester food dehydrators to bake the reels, like a convection oven, and they come back pretty well. You can get usually about 1 or 2 plays, and then they start sucking up the moisture again and turning back to mud. The problem I've got, like with the tapes that John gave me to transfer, they're like mud and they're squealy, and I can probably get about 20 seconds of audio off of them. Then I have to clean the heads and start all over again. So I end up piecemeal with Cool Edit, aka Adobe Audition, digitally putting the thing back together so it sounds right.
Who would have thought that whale oil had so much to do with this?
of all the stupid things. But Ed, Mr. Bruder, you've had some experience with this stuff too. I'm sure you've had fun.
Yeah, it was. I have old master tapes from Pam's that go back to 1959 that are great, and they're made of the old Scotch 111, I think it was.
Was 111.
It was a brown configuration, and it was before the high output, low noise tapes that came along in the mid 70s. And all that Ampex stock that we had from those days is all mud now.
Yeah, 206 and the 456 are all crap now.
456, yeah.
You know, and I mean, it was funny because like with the jingle reels, when John started Jam, he was using Agfa and the tape that will last forever. And they literally came in and baked all of his reels so he could play them and make backup copies of them. You know, the tapes will last forever. It's like CD rot or DVD rot. I read an article this week from talking about the fact that Warner Brothers Home Video is replacing a lot of movies they put out on DVD for customers because the DVDs that are only 10, 15 years old are turning to crap. The problem is a lot of the titles that are turning to crap, they're no longer issuing, so they have to replace them with something else, not necessarily the movie that was originally on the customer bought.
Same thing applies to CDs, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I've got CDs in house here that won't play. 90% of the stuff I got from the late Ben Friedman doesn't play. You know, he used a crappy brand. When I started transferring the TM masters back in 2000, 2001, I was smart enough, or so I thought, I was smart enough that I had 3M not DVD, CDs, and I also did them on Maxell. So anything that I did, I made 2 copies on 2 different types of media. The problem at that point, of course, is that hard drives were very expensive and I couldn't leave the stuff on hard drives. But again, that's problematic too.
I think Tracy, when CDs first came out, was about 1981 or 83, and the makers of them then predicted 50-year lifespans. Well, where are we? We're moving in on 50 years.
Yeah.
Well, they were saying 100 years too. I mean, I remember spending $33 for one TDK blank back then. You know, meanwhile, in the 90s and the aughts, I was paying 10 cents a piece for them. You know, it's definitely a difference. But, you know, and I have thousands and thousands and thousands of CDs on top of everything else. And that's why I'm trying to move a lot of the stuff up to the 20 terabyte hard drives I just showed you pictures of or video of. I don't guarantee that those will last forever, but even the drives, the Jingle drive, which is 20 terabytes, the main one, I've got 3 backups of it. 2 are in house and 1 is out of house just in case. I hate to be so redundant, but it's not like if you lose a reel of tape, you lose 30 minutes of audio. You lose a hard drive, you lost hundreds of hours of materials.
I've got 2 words for you. Vinyl lives.
Yeah, I know.
Tracy, have you ever put a value on your collection?
You
Good
can't, and that's the
question.
problem. It's you know, how do you value it, even for insurance purposes? You're talking about 50-year-old materials that, you know, a select group of people care about. I don't think you really can put a value on it. I mean, I can tell you how much money I've got vested in this stuff. I mean, that's an easy thing because I ran a Quicken report. You know, it's 30 years of Media Preservation Foundation, and I ran a Quicken report going back 25 years to when we started the whole thing. We've taken in $40,000 and spent $424,000. So, you know,
Wow.
it's again, the best line I ever heard is one man's antiques is another man's old furniture.
I want to see you on
Yeah.
NPR with the collection of antiques and get an expert up there to give you a valuation for insurance purposes, Tracy Carmen.
Yeah,
Yes.
for insurance purposes, the real's worth $1.50.
Yeah, $20 million insurance policy. How about that?
I'll
And you've
take
got
it.
a rare Terry Woods from WDRC FM in 1970.
There you go.
You know,
You do?
the reality here of this stuff, listen, it has intrinsic value. I mean, you know, again, I can't put a value on it. I don't have the stuff insured. How do you insure the stuff? How do you put a value?
Yeah.
And if I had a claim, how do you get them to pay the claim? You know, the reality here is there's more stuff up here, with the exception of John Wolfert and the Jam Archives down in Dallas. The majority of everything else from Dallas producers, there are exceptions. I mean, but the big collections, TM, even Ben Friedman, Century 21, Pepper Tanner, which is Memphis, Drake, Chenault. I mean, that stuff's all sitting here in Springfield.
Maybe
You
if
know,
you
it's-
want to go legit
Wow.
with this whole thing, why don't you become an appraiser? Like, you know,
Well, I think the only thing I've really become in the last 25 years, or actually doing this longer than that, Peter Cans calls it dog rescue. You're rescuing this stuff from ending up in the trash can. The only thing I've become very good at is clean outs. You know, going through and sorting out and finding the gold, what I consider to be the golden collections. There's a collection of tapes right now that I want to get my hands on. And I've talked to the producer, and they're sitting in a storage unit. He's 87 years old. And well, when I get to it, I get to it. And I get that.
Yep.
This is, to them, this is nothing more than selling hamburgers or whatever. This is a way for them to make their meals. That there is no magic to this stuff.
Yeah, but Tracy, you mention all this stuff and cost involved and everything else, but I venture to say there's a lot of families like mine that would really just wanted to go somewhere, and I'm sure they would pay shipping and everything else just so they know it is somewhere for their own peace of mind. Where it goes, the generation after you and after that, we don't know. But for today, I mean, I can tell you, it's got to be brutal for unless the family's all divided and stuff. It's got to be brutal to go in there when you know someone in your family has stuff that's priceless, and you do toss it or you do try. You can't sell it on eBay. So I mean, just a place for it to go. And I mean, I think one of the biggest questions I have is how the hell do you come up with this stuff? What'd you say one day? You know something? I'll bet you if I take these tapes and I put them in the oven and I turn up the heat, I can save them. I mean, how do you
You
is
read
a lot of this
articles,
self-taught?
you read articles, you talk to people, it's like doing equalization curves. We're all used to NAB, there's AME. John Wolford had to come up with a setup to do the old PAMS reels because they're in the AME equalization curve, which probably nobody here has ever even heard of.
No.
You get a network of people that deal with this stuff all the time, and you pick up little tricks along the way. As far as collecting stuff, my favorite story, I was down in Dallas. Oh God, this is I'm trying to remember when I was down there with Peter Cans, and we went over to Margie Meek's house, and Margie's husband started Pam's, Bill Meeks, and she had a closet about the width of half the width of my dining room, a corridor thing, which her husband was long gone, with all these reels in there that from Bill Meeks' days at Pam's and beyond when he had William Meeks Productions. And she said to me, you can take a look at these, but I'm going to hold on to these. These are collectors, blah, 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 blah. And I pulled the tapes out of the closet, and Peter looked at me and said, I don't know why you're pulling them out of the closet. He said, they're not going anywhere. I said, watch. and I said to Margie, I said, listen, one of your daughters is deceased. Your other son worked in the business. He has no interest in this stuff. And your other daughter doesn't care. I said, you have 3 kids that don't care. I said, here's the reality. 20 minutes after they sign your death certificate, the dumpster is going to be lying on the driveway, and it's going to be heave ho, let's sell the house and let's get out of here. And and sure enough, she was holding the door open as we were taking the tapes out and putting them in the boxes to take over to FedEx to ship north. And that's the reality.
That's right.
This stuff really, really doesn't have a lot of value commercially. We dealt with the guy that had the Future Sonic Masters, and I'm going to resyndicate this stuff. This was in 1995. The tapes went back to 1964. I could count the number of people that were interested in the stuff and resyndicating it on one finger, and it was the middle one. So, it's again, one man's junk is another man's antiques. And it's nice that you think that, the original Pam's went out of business in 1978 when I was a senior in high school. It's nice that Ben Friedman revived it. It's nice that John Wolford's doing resings on the stuff, but it's had its time, and there's limited commercial value to this stuff. And the producers, I'm sorry, I'm rambling. Even Tom Merriman looked at me and he said, I'm not interested in what I produced last week. I'm interested in what's going to make me a living next week. The past doesn't make a difference.
Well, it's interesting because when you if there's a way to get the word out, at least people should know. And I mean, whether it's through the NAB, the RAB, Inside Radio, whatever, just so they know you do it. And I mean, I know you've probably only got so much room in the warehouse, but I think there's actually people that would, instead of you paying, for FedEx or whatever to get up here, I think people would at least like to know that's an option. And whether they have to tell their kids or you tell them, that it's still a matter of, geez, they're in the dumpster. I wish I'd known about that 6 months ago. So, I mean, I don't expect you to spend a lot of money advertising it or anything else, but I would think it's a service that, I mean, not that it's going to go there, but just imagine if there was a place like, whether it's a museum of television and radio or something. Imagine if you could walk in and look at this and have all these markets like you have, and be able to push a button with headphones on and go, oh my God, these jingles from Toledo, these jingles from, I mean, this is stuff that, I mean, I had things that were my dad's, and I was surprised on how long some of the tape lasted. Even a letter to Kennedy, which was back in the 60s, 63, when we found that, it was pretty good. I mean, we still had to clean it up. Can some of this stuff, Tracy, go through some of today's technology digitally and get cleaned up at all? We cleaned up the acetate of my mom and dad announcing their engagement on DRC. Can you do that with some of the tapes?
Oh, absolutely. And most of the tapes, if as long as they're playable, they pretty much sound the same as they did, with the exception, like I said, if you get a reel that squeals, you still get a good play out of it. It's just you have to be very careful with it. And in the case of those, I'm holding a Q-tip with alcohol on it so that it doesn't gum up the heads as it goes through. It can be done. It's just time consuming. And there's one of me. I get help from a few other people doing transfers. I just brought a bunch of New York air checks. I went out and picked up the Gene Shepard collection out of Peter Cairns a couple of weeks ago. At the same time, I dropped off a whole bunch of air checks that I got from John Lund, who was programming WNBC and WGAR. And Peter's transferring those to CD right now so that we can archive those and put those up on the server.
We should drag Peter onto one of these Radio Friends again some week, because Peter has a wealth of knowledge, worked in New York City radio, and he's a little gruff with collectors sometimes, but he'd be very knowledgeable to have on here.
Yeah, he's very gruff with collectors. He gets a little annoyed sometimes, because they can be pesky. And he can get on here. I just installed a new notebook computer at his place while I was there, so he certainly has the technology to do it now.
Yeah, I mean, getting somebody like John Wolford. I mean, the stuff that they could recall and the singers that were in there doing some of these jingles. I mean, I know their time is very valuable and stuff, but even if, I was listening to John Leslie, who does, talking about radio, and he had Tom Shotgun Kelly on the other day. And, hearing stories for him is wonderful. So you guys still have a lot of very, very cool connections, East Coast and West Coast. So, I think I'm not, I'm always saying let's look for new people, but when they've got, some of these guys are walking history books.
Well, we've talked about getting Greg Clancy on here. I know Pete's approached him, I've approached him, and I should just kind of beat him up to get on here, who's one of the three owners of TM. And John Wolford does a Sunday radio show on
but he
Alan
doesn't wake
Sniffin's
up.
site.
He doesn't wake up, Tracy, until like noon Dallas time. So
exactly. But I think I could think of excuse me, I can think of a lot of interesting people I'd love to get on here. I'd love to get John Baylor on here, who's out in Branson. And John was one of the Ron Hicklin singers. His high voice from like the theme to Love American Style. And, he sang on the TIC jingles. He's the high voice on the Music Connection jingles. And he's been around forever. He's married to one of the Lennon sisters.
Tracy, I still think you need a national platform, like a CBS Sunday Morning, some way that somebody could do this on a national level to get the word out there. And you would be surprised how many people would respond.
Well, I thought of trying to do a podcast kind of thing. I own talkthetalk.com. I sold The Talk to CBS for their thing years ago. But I think it'd be interesting just to get 10-minute, 15-minute interviews like I did with Billy Davis and Marilyn McCoo, or with Gary Puckett, or with some of these other people that are not exactly spring chickens like the rest of us here, and document it and get them to talk about their careers and not get into the esoteric crap that some of these people get into in these interviews. Just get a real nuts and bolts conversation going with these folks.
There are some people that are.
You think about Tommy James when Ron was telling all those stories about Tommy James. I think that's great stuff. I mean, I think we'd all enjoy it, especially because what they had to go through with different radio stations, perhaps, whether it was them directly or their reps or whatever. I think that's interesting.
Sure, how much cocaine had to go through.
Yeah, was the line from WKRP? My foot's asleep. I've got a monkey on my foot, or something from one of those episodes. No, I think there's a lot of opportunity. It's just a question of timing and getting these people and doing it. And there's a lot of podcasts and other things, interviews and stuff out there. I just think some days I should throw my hat into the ring and get a Tommy James, or get a a Tom Baylor or a John Baylor or a Ron Hicklin. I mean, I can go down the list.
Gary
You
Puckett,
know,
he'd be terrific to get. I mean,
nicest guy in the world, Gary. He's living down. I spent some time with him when he was at the Big E here. But these people would love to be interviewed, and I just don't think you ask the same 20 questions that everybody's asked them for the last 50 years. I think you have a conversation, not what was your first record? What was,
Yeah,
I'm saying that kind of thing.
But I think if it's something where if anybody ever does capture somebody who's interested, nail them down. Say, okay, what Friday works for you, and we'll book them. Just say, okay, well, in April we're going to do this or whatever, and that way at least they can expect it and be ready. Versus let's if they're willing to do it, I think that'd be good, and we can just line them up. Of course, and I mean even getting like Randy West back on, or getting Joe back on. Some of these guys that we had on maybe a couple of years ago, I think it'd be great to.
We
to hear
missed
them again.
having Bob Rivers on. He and I were talking about it. I was supposed to be reminding him every Thursday that it was going to be tomorrow, and tomorrow never came.
It happens. That's the sad thing, and very sad that he's gone.
Oh,
Such
let's
a
get
creative
Bob
guy.
Steele. Never mind.
That's going to be, as Jerry Christopher would say, that's the heavenly hotline.
Well, there's a guy.
Jared, really. You talk about a guy with a background and a history, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, my buddy comes up from Pittsburgh and talks about Jerry, world famous, as he calls him. It'd be interesting to get Jerry on here. Absolutely, he's been around for a long time.
Ed, did you say there's an air check of somebody named Terry Woods?
Oh yeah.
Where
Absolutely.
is this air check on your site?
I definitely have an air check of Terry Woods.
Because
it's the man with the goods.
I've got an air check of me and Dick Robinson on DRC. I pulled it out. Oh yeah, him and I were doing a bit on FM and stuff. It was some kind of a charity event, and it's still there. It's still good.
Wow.
I think, when I was in Martha's Vineyard, Russ, I brought it with me, but we didn't have time to play it. When Dick was with us up at the vineyard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I brought that tape with me, but we never did get a chance to play it. And I'm over there doing, and Dickie Robinson, there was a whole big deal we were doing on the old thing there. I have a picture of me and Dick Robinson with Little D. The dune buggy?
The dune buggy.
Little D.
Yeah,
I
set
got
it
a
on
picture.
fire in our driveway. I remember that.
Right. Yeah. He was sitting, we're both sitting, but of course, Dick being so tall, he towers over the windshield,
Yeah, he kept it in the garage at his house for a while. I think maybe out in Manchester or something. I think he kept it there. That was a tremendous thing. In fact, it's funny if you go online and even look up dune buggies. They still make them. They still sell them. A lot of them that I saw out in California, and they look exactly like that. I mean, it was a fun promotion. We just had a few guys sign on with us, and I want to make sure that I point everybody out. Jim Harrington stepped away from his podcast to spend a few minutes with us, and I would imagine that's been getting pretty hot lately. Yes, Terry Woods is here. Lee Gordon's here. Bob Marks is here. I think I did that. I get everybody. I want to just make sure that people know everybody's here. Did I miss anybody or what?
You get Russ?
No, I'm here. You said it before.
Yep. Russ is still here.
John Landry's living room.
It's really it's amazing the stuff that people all the connections that you guys have. You just don't know. I mean,
Steve,
you don't know if you don't ask.
Steve, do you know whatever happened to the Big D mobile trailer that we broadcast from?
Where did that
Studio
go?
D.
Studio D, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Anybody who can tell you is dead.
The Big D Mobile Studio D.
We used to use that for the Manchester Road Race. That was the last time that it was used on a regular once a year on a regular basis. We bring it out to Main Street in Manchester. I remember the first time we did it, we got there about 7 o'clock in the morning, and the race doesn't start till 10. And Wayne Mulligan comes over to me and he says, "You told me there'll be a lot of people here." Like, what do you do? I said, "Dick," I said, "Wayne, the race doesn't start till 10 o'clock. this is the biggest road race in America on Thanksgiving Day. He says, all right, well, we'll see. And then about 9:30, there's a million people. He goes, never mind what I said before. Brad used to do his show from there, and he got it was the best show of the year because he had so many guests on, so many people who would run that race or involved in that race, and that was the last time we used it regularly, and that went on until about, I want to say, I don't know, I left in 2006, and I think they were still doing it then.
They
But
had to
then I think
rework
as the
that.
station was sold, I think that when the station was sold, that studio went along with the sale.
Jim Harrington, I believe, was the first to broadcast from Mobile Studio D, and it was at the Lynch Toyota. Put your hands on a Toyota.
God,
yeah.
That's what
So
I
that was
thinking.
only around during the 70s, that mobile unit?
71, maybe.
Yeah,
Well,
that was,
I
yeah,
know
that was
70, that was 73 or 74 because it must have been 74. I was doing the morning show.
No, I think it was a little bit before that because I was
When
out
we
of
when we did the when we did the
We did
Lynch
two of them.
Toyota thing,
Yeah,
they were
hands-on
still
Toyota.
when they did the Lynch Toyota thing, they were still putting equipment in the Wayne
In
was
the trailer.
installing like the turntables or the cart
Yeah.
machines or something. When did they ever revamp it over the course of the years, change it, or was it
Well,
still the same
I
setup?
remember that we could not play the records in there because they hadn't stabilized it. And
Right.
everybody walking around in the back of the studio would make the records jump. So records had to be played back at the station while we were doing the other stuff because everything was jumping around in there. And they said,
Yeah.
Wayne
Jim,
was
to your point, they never
did.
did. As a matter of fact, when Brad would broadcast from there, it was just a remote broadcast. He would just Tom Ray or Rob Ray would be running the board back at the studio, and he would just go back and forth with Brad, and there was no record by that time. There was a talk station, and he would just go back and forth, and Brad would have guests on and whatnot. When we did the Manchester Road Race, so there was no use for the record players and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that was
the way these places, like, there's no more remotes. I mean, everybody, you have a jock that shows up and
Called an appearance now. They're called appearances.
yeah,
Right.
and they do a couple of phoners, once or twice.
They do it on
an hour
this.
in the car dealership.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is, Ted. That's right. That's right. And
Yeah,
that's been that way for a long time.
I broadcast from Mobile Studio D a number of times, and we used to do it annually at the Greater Hartford Open.
GHO.
Yeah.
When we were at the GHO, a lot of the celebrities, would come in to the studio, sit there, and we do interviews with some of the biggest names in TV and movies, and it was wonderful.
Bob,
I think that was one of the greatest things that Big D had because even when John Lennon died, right there in Constitution Plaza, we had the mobile studio right in the midst of the thousands of people that showed up. I was on the air doing the midday show right from there, and we were surrounded by, just so many faces. It was just a great thing to have for the station.
But you have to realize too, which they finally did, and my dad would say the same thing. If we're gonna go out with the mobile unit, we got to go where the people are.
Yes.
And be part of an event. Be part of an event that you draw a lot of people in, and you do, like the Manchester Road Race, like Ron was saying. The freaking governor, everybody would come to be there. And they all wanted to be at that event. And the problem is, and Ron, I don't know if you may remember these things. You go out to a car dealer and say, we're going to be here Saturday, and wait till you see what happens. And there's 16 people or 3. And then the guy says, well, nobody listens to your radio station. And if they show up, they only want to watch a jock talk for so long. So,
But Steve, the exception was the Lynch Toyota thing. That was not an event.
That was just nuts.
we brought people there,
Well, that was so crazy that people just had to see this
nuts.
Because Charlie turned it into an event. It wasn't just a remote at a car dealer. It was an event. That's what made the difference.
There were two of them. There were 2 of them, right?
Yeah.
We did one.
Well, the second year was awful, and he didn't even want to do it again because
then the state of Connecticut shut it down for safety reasons.
Because no one knew about it the first time. So when they did it, it was it didn't draw everybody as far as the state of Connecticut and the Board of Health and all that. But as soon as they knew it was coming the second time, that was and a lot of times you do a great promotion, walk away. So many times they want to double it up or triple it up, or the sales department, let's do it again next year.
Yeah, blame it on the sales department, Steve.
It's like a sequel.
Hey, I was one of those guys.
It's our fault.
If the shoe fits.
It's like a sequel to a great movie. Sometimes the sequel never
Doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
when you try to create your own event by bringing the van or a remote, it never works. It only works when you're there for a big event.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing with Feed a Friend Foodathon was terrific because West Farms had only been open a couple of months and people couldn't wait to see them all anyways. And then when you heard it on the air and it was over there, a lot of people wanted to come there anyways. But it was funny because there's on one of the tapes, my dad said he wanted to do a follow-up to Feed a Friend Foodathon, which was Bleed a Friend Bloodathon. And something with the Red Cross, you know. But
one of the greatest promotions we ever did, that was it was a remote, but it was more of a promotion, and it cost nothing, and it had tremendous dividends. In 1970 at Wixie, Cleveland, we did a thing called the Miss Hot Pants Contest. And we held it at noon, and it was at the Cleveland Square, and there were thousands and thousands of people there. It was unbelievable. I have video of that somewhere that one of the guys sent me. It was interesting because they finally picked a girl who had for the Miss Hot Pants Contest. She was wearing hot pants that said Coca-Cola on it. Guess who won?
We had some bad ones. Bob Marks, you may remember this. This goes way back. There was a club in downtown Hartford called Silk Purse Sow's
Ear. Yes, we did something there. I remember
we did it. Rob, Bob Marks, you hosted. It was a mud wrestling contest. Because I remember I was there with Byron McClanahan that night. And you were hosting it. And I think Danny Lyons was actually there. I think he was doing something with his radio station too. And I'll never forget that. That was one of the worst things we've ever done. And you were trying to make something out of it.
I remember doing a nightclub appearance, and I was emceeing there, and Charlie was there, and I think Russ Dana was with us, and we had a penthouse pet of the month who was there. I remember there was a picture taken of me, Charlie, Russ Dana, and maybe one other, and maybe it was at that event. I forgot.
I don't remember that part. I just remember the mud wrestling, which turned into a huge fiasco. But it was a lot of people there, and you were the host.
But the Mark Anthony's thing, that was wild. In the middle of the winter, where they filled the place with sand, that drew a lot of people.
Right. Yeah, the beach parties in the wintertime. That's right.
Right. Yeah, I was there at that one.
Lee and I were talking yesterday. Lee Gordon and I were talking about the bridal fairs that used to go on down in Hartford. And I remember the one that I hosted when I was at Mix 93.7, the last job that I did there. But one of them, hosted a bridal fair, and apparently they had a part of the fair was a fashion show. So they were coming out with gowns and stuff and evening wear. And apparently the girls that they hired for the fashion show were some of the strippers from out in Winstead. And this one girl went out in a negligee, and she was totally naked underneath the thing, and it's flowing along, and we're looking, it's like, this was before Brazilians. I mean, we're talking, this girl's walking around on stage like, hello, wait a minute. And his program director said, get your jacket off, cover her up, let's get her off the stage.
Do you guys remember, Bob Craig may remember this, Charlie, there was a promotion we did for a movie called Naked Came the Stranger.
Oh, yeah, I remember that movie.
Do you remember that, Ted? There was
Burt Lancaster.
No, it wasn't Burt. No, it wasn't Burt Lancaster.
Oh, no, it was a different one. Okay.
It was Big Lancaster, I think, but it wasn't. Burt.
That was a movie that was written by a bunch of actual legitimate authors using a fake name.
Well, it was really? they had the a premiere, not the premiere, over in the Manchester theaters, and we promoted it, and we went over there. Charlie was there. We went in there. I sat down, and they turned the movie on, and it was a porn movie. It was, and I thought to myself, does Charlie know what we're doing? I think Charlie didn't stick around, but I did tell him, and we didn't mention it on the air after that.
No, you'd never get a clue from the title.
No, Naked Came the Stranger. That sounds like Longest Day.
Was Samantha Fox in that? Was Samantha Fox in that movie? More.
Remember her? She had 15 minutes of fame.
I don't think so.
Samantha Fox.
Yeah.
It was.
She's now transgender and she's Sam Fox.
Oh.
But you know, it wasn't really a surprise because that was about the time the movie Deep Throat came out. And I can remember as in Rockville, there was a theater and they had lines of people that would never go to a porn movie who were going to see that movie out of curiosity because it had that kind of promotion.
I believe that theater was owned by the parents of Mike Adams.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
What's the
Mike
Rockville
Adams,
Theater?
Yeah, Mike Adams worked there for a while too. After he got off one of the radio gigs and he spent time working at the theater, and then he managed to get back on the air and wound up around Boston. But
so you know, Mike Adams' brother's his name was John Adams, which I always got a kick out of.
Really?
And he was in a group called the Nifty's 50s Band. And they were great. And they were an oldies band. Anything DRC would do back in those days, he would be like the house band. He would come and show up and whatnot. That band, they were really good. John Adams.
Wasn't there a movie theater either on way down south on Main Street or Weathersfield Avenue that used to play dirty films in the old days?
Yeah, you gotta get a hold of Jimmy English. Jimmy would let you know on that.
You're right.
What'd you say, Bob?
I said Jimmy English would definitely.
Oh yeah,
yeah. He had a lifetime pass. I think it was the Webster. It was just above I-84. If you were going up on Main Street, just past I-84. It was an old theater. You're right.
It was an old theater, right? Yeah, that's right, Ted.
It's a music venue now. It's been a music venue for a long time.
Oh yeah, the Webster.
Yeah, the Webster. Oh yeah, 104 Radio 104 did a lot of promotion there. A lot of stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It was a music
Martin
venue.
Gets thrown out of there all the time.
Yeah, the Silk Factory in Manchester was a music venue for quite some time. They were playing. They had jazz guys come in there, Pat Metheny and some other guys.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if they're still doing music over there, or they turned it into an apartment complex.
Hi, Diane. Hello, Diane.
Hi, Diane.
Oh, did?
Pete did.
Hi, Diane.
Nice to see you guys.
Good to see you, Annie.
Yes.
And the conversation got quiet then. Thanks for the tip. We used to.
Russ, that's a very interesting. Russ, that's a very interesting getup you have there today. All black.
I'm on my way to the gym as soon as we're done.
I was going to ask you where are the whips?
$20.
Yep, he owes it to me.
In Albany.
Chuck, are you receiving that or are you sending that?
You'll never see a penny of it.
Hey, did you guys hear that? I can't remember what chain it was, whether it was Town Square or Odyssey, but one of the chains turned off a bunch of radio stations this last week.
Yes.
Oh. There was one that went dark in Erie, PA. They signed off.
Yeah, I mean that's one of them.
Some AM/FM combinations, and in markets the size of Birmingham, I think one of the stations was in Birmingham, Bob, which is a top 50 market.
Yeah.
You guys hear about that?
No.
Yes, and there were some FMs involved too.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely FM. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do they turn them off or do they sell them? I mean, they turn the licenses back in?
Turn them off. They
turn them off, Jim, and then you apply to the FCC. You say, hey, I could manage this station. I could shepherd this station better than the people who turned it off. Give me the license.
Didn't Odyssey also turn over its top management this week at the corporate level?
Well, I think they changed a few weeks ago.
I think last week. David Field. It took them long enough, right?
We went off the air at NBC. They retired the call letters. You couldn't get them anywhere after that.
Say that again, Bill?
Well, a lot of times the stations go off the air, the people will buy the call letters or apply for them. But WNBC, actually the FCC retired the call letters.
Well, because I think they did a smart thing. They changed the call letters of the TV station to WNBC from WNBC TV. So they couldn't get them.
Now the call letters are hanging from the rafters, but probably the FCC is going to go away if the current administration took out Voice of America. How long is it going to be before they start moving in the FCC?
Well, they use the FCC for allocation more than anything else. It used to be in the old days they were monitoring for overpower, overmodulation, all that stuff. Now it's just really frequency allocation.
It's terrible to see. I know at my place they don't even know I exist. The reason I'm still on Saturday morning, nobody knows. I mean, it's I'm Steve Salhaney just said to me one time, "Hey Steve, if anyone ever tries to hire you away from us, I promise I will never stop them." There you go.
I've told you many times about the story about me working for 13 different program directors, and of course the first one being Peter. But,
hello.
I used to go in every Saturday, and the first thing I did was I checked to see if my picture was still in the hallway. I figured I was still employed by that. I went for that for 15 years.
Hey, Bill, you think that's a big deal? Chuck Martin worked for 13 different program directors in 2 weeks.
That's about the size of it.
Yeah.
Life was tough back then.
Do you remember that when you did critiques, everybody did critiques. It was at Y&Y, and I wouldn't do it because I had done a number of things before that, and I was being obstinate and wanted to do my own thing. And finally, you came to my house to do a critique. Remember that?
Who, me?
Yes, you came to my house and said, "Mohammed will come to the mountains, so I'll go to you."
I'm not remember. You got some memory, Bill. No. Wow.
He came to my studio.
You know, you mentioned Bridal Fair, Pete. You remember we did Bridal Fair at AVZ?
Oh, every year, yeah.
And then
and NHC too, also, buddy.
Yeah, and then I worked for the guy who invented that thing, Don Burden, Star Broadcasting. Right. You know, he's the one who put that whole thing together.
Yeah.
Coil, Wife, and Kissin'. Yeah. And I did that at both Kissin' and Wife and AVZ, the Bridal Fair, and they had the jingles and everything, and that was an extravaganza.
Sure, I can remember putting together promos with your voice on them. And I would do the production. So
I think there's also a connection between Pam's and Bridal Fair, because William Bland Jr. was an announcer at POP, and he left there to go to Bridal Fair as their New England regional representative to try to franchise it around the different stations. And I think they had all the custom jingles cut at Pam's.
Yeah. Steve, I saw Joe Cipriano last week. We were at his studio. He was in one place doing a voiceover, and I was too. And I said, the guys at DRC, they want you back for a thing. He's, oh, yeah, I remember that. I said, keep it in mind. He says, he's got a busy schedule, which he does.
Yeah.
And he just got back from Italy a while ago. He was over in Italy. And, one other thing, last week I said about the passing of Bob Rivers, and, he was really a super talented. At AVZ, there was a little funny story here. I hired him from All Nights because he was just, it was his first gig. I just hired him did he go to Connecticut School of Broadcasting?
I know he started at a high school radio station at Brantford High.
Maybe that was it, because he brought me a raw tape and everything. So I put him on the All Night Show, and I knew this guy had something. Well, anyway, back then I was under the tutelage of Paul Drew, and, some of the tactics of Drew, always had the earphone in his ear monitoring his stations. Well, and then go into the station in the middle of the night when you'd think nobody was listening. This was his tactic. So I kind of picked that up back then. So I go in at 2:00 in the morning just to let Rivers know that I'm always listening. I'm always on the radio. So I go in there, and there was a stack of 6, what was that, ITC cart machines? Yeah. What do we have?
2 or 3 deckers.
Yeah, 2 and 3 deckers. And he's got these White Castle hamburgers in each one of the things to keep warm. I said, hey, Bob, what the hell is that in the cart machines? Oh, that's my lunch. I said, pull one of those out. He pulls it out, and it's a White Castle hamburger. So, I mean, of course, well, sorry to say, I ripped his ass up one side and the other. But, I mean, it was a funny story. It'll live forever. Bob
and there were
Rivers and
two other people who would attest to that. Lloyd Prezant, who was one of our engineers, I worked with him at Y&Y as well.
Yeah.
And he said he's the one who had to clean the cheese off the cab stands.
Yeah, Lloyd, the
Bob
record
told me
Lloyd.
it was Bob says it was true. So you're saying it was true. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. The White Castle had the burger warmer. They weren't cart machines, they were burger warmers.
It was the White Castle down the street from ABG.
Yeah. God bless him. Let him rest in peace.
Yes,
Good
sir.
man.
Hey, what was the name of that engineer you mentioned? What was his name?
Lloyd Prezant.
See, that's a great engineer's name, don't you think?
Yeah. We used to call him Lloyd the Record Void.
Some of them had very distinguished names. I remember the chief engineer at BZ at that time. His name was Warren Hauser. Does that sound familiar to you, Jim? Was he still around then?
Yeah,
Warren Hauser.
There was a
guy. There was an engineer up in Littleton, New Hampshire, and Berlin, New Hampshire. His name was Herschel Howe, and he looked exactly like his name.
Wayne Mulligan had a great name as an engineer because he kind of flowed, Wayne Mulligan.
Did some of you guys work with Francois Gouin?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. A gem.
Francois.
Yeah. I remember.
And he was a great skier.
Yes, he was.
I remember him up at Brody Mountain. The man had a full-length raccoon coat skiing down Brody Mountain.
How could he be? He was 400 pounds. What are you talking? He skied.
Yeah, he was, for some reason or another, he was a skier, and you would never think so, as you mentioned. I remember one time doing an all-night show at HDH in Boston. That's where Francois went after DRC. And it was the night that we went to, I guess it was back to standard time, but you had to manually turn the clocks back at that point. And I remember doing the show, and he had everything there. At HDH, they ran everything. So all you did was announce. And I happened to look up, and there's Francois standing on a console, shifting the clocks back. And I was not even thinking anything about it. He was just a one-of-a-kind guy. But he loved to listen to the conversations the jocks had.
You mean on the telephone, Bob?
That's right.
He was always listening to our phones, and the girls would call in. What's her name?
Hey, listen, you guys are pretty much all of you guys on Facebook?
Yeah. I'm not.
Yeah.
You're not? Okay, Bob's not. Only because there's a piece on here that was posted by Jeff Curtis. Ed, do you know him?
I do. He lives in the New Britain area, I think, and he worked briefly at POP back around 1968 after his military service, and he's been he's never worked in radio full time, but he's a real fan of Hartford radio.
Well, it's interesting because
he posted the Ken Griffin air check that I referred to earlier.
Yeah, he posted a bit of a lengthy piece here on Facebook. That's why I thought you guys might want to check it out. It's under Remembering Hartford Radio. But it's with great honor I present for your listening pleasure tape 1 of 2 tapes featuring Hartford's radio's Ken Griffin's Big Skinny, the president of the Royal Order of the Black Sox Club. The tape is from WDRC, February 1968. You'll hear a little Fats Fontoon, but not Rocky. Ken jumped to DRC for a $75 raise Charlie Parker offered him. I never felt Kenny was comfortable with the DRC format, restraining his Fats and Rocky characters the fans loved. Ken left Hartford in '72 for KGIL Los Angeles, another Buckley-owned station. While out there, he lived on a houseboat. I met Kenny in '60.
You've frozen, Steve.
Huh?
Oh, you froze there for a minute.
Yeah, you froze.
Frozen?
Yes.
What, you got snow up there in Connecticut?
Gortons of Gloucester.
Yeah. You're still frozen, Steve. You must have some. Yeah, what'd you get, a snowstorm last night?
That's a great still, isn't it?
There he is with his mouth open. Yeah, we
Yes,
lost
it
power
is.
here earlier ourselves.
God, I've never known Steve at a loss for words.
Really?
You're back, Steve.
Yes, yes, yes.
You know about Kenny Griffin, and he came to LA to KGIL, the other Buckley station out here. He became a record promoter. He promoted records when I was at KHJ. He was there.
Oh.
Yeah, he got involved with Joey Reynolds out there, and was it Tracy? Are you still there? The Mingles jingle effort.
Oh yeah, I've got versions of them for KQV and for a bunch of other stations, including KBW. Correct. He was doing those. It's almost like record sing over and mock-offs, you know.
It's interesting that Jeff mentioned in his thing that he didn't think Griffin was comfortable at the DRC format. I think he was more structured than he had been at POP. But I've got several air checks of him at KGIL, and he was a great MOR jock. He just really got
I met Kenny in '65, interviewing him for the school newspaper. We became friends till he passed in Punta Gorda, Florida in 2010. At that time, Kenny worked weekends at WKII?
Yep.
Hosting a radio show. When Ken returned to Hartford in '77, he was embraced by one Dick Robinson. Dick and Kenny at the Farmington House, then put him up at the Farmington Inn and helped him get back into Hartford radio. Ed Bruder, there you go. Ed Bruder created a radio where are they now website for WDRC and WPOP, WDRCOBG.com, where you can look up your favorite DJs and also read a great interview Ed did with Kenny. Special thanks to Charles M-E-N-U-T, Minute, for bringing Kenny back to us through his superb technical skills. By the way, if you want a hot link of this tape, just ask and he will send it to you. Kent Clark, a well-known, well-revered fan favorite, reads the news at the end of the tape. So that's on Remembering Hartford Radio, and then the link is there. And I'm sure.
Yeah, I think he put it in the WPOP alumni Facebook group as well, I think.
And the New England radio stations group.
Yeah,
too.
he cross-posted it in a bunch of places.
Yeah, it's funny. He has a picture in here of his. This is to certify. It's an official member of WPOP's Order of the Black Sox, and it is entitled "All Privileges Therein." So, and that's signed by Fats and Ken. So that's interesting. If anybody can get on Facebook or on do you have that air check available to you, Ed? Is that where it came from?
I do. Actually, I think it came from Jeff to me originally about 30 years ago. And that particular time, if this particular air check was February of '68, for about 6 months there, Ken was doing afternoon drive at DRC. It's like they didn't know what to do because they had brought in Reynolds to do nights, which partly displaced Ken's shift. But Dick Robinson was also in the process of getting off the air to go into sales full time. So they had these three guys that all had night experience, and they weren't quite sure how to schedule them. And I don't think Griffin was ever that comfortable in the afternoon drive format. I think that particular show that he's referring to is a weekly countdown show.
It's from his book, Face for Radio. I think he took a lot of facts and twisted them upside down in that. My dad, according to Kenny, was one of the owners of the radio station, which I never had an opportunity to find out about. But it's an interesting book because
when Ken wrote that, it was like 40 years after the fact, after he'd worked at Hartford, so there were details that were not accurate. Compared to Joey Reynolds,
by and large, it is pretty accurate.
It is
overall.
Compared to Joey Reynolds' book about his career, he just didn't remember his Hartford years. And he admits he was high half the time, so he doesn't mention much about Hartford.
Back in '68, when I was working with Kenny, was there. Ken Clark, Walt Pinto, of course, brought him to my studio. And the first thing he saw was a whole wall, what I call a wall of fame, people I'd worked with, people I'd interviewed. There was all these celebrities and so forth. And he looked at me and said, "I have no past. I have no pictures," which I found an interesting, odd thing to say.
I remember we had a staff boat cruise at POP and 104, and Kenny was working at 104 at the time, and they basically had two cruises. Half the people went on one. I think it was also to entertain clients, and half the staff went on one cruise and half was going on the other. And Kenny went on the first cruise, and he just got got up and just launched into an impromptu dialogue that was a monologue that was so funny that they asked him to go on the second cruise and try to do it again.
Oh, shit. Wow.
Yeah, they were, and of course, him and Joey together were amazing. They had a bachelor pad up on top of one of the hills in Cromwell, I think, and it was wild. You know, it had a sunken living room in it, and it was, you know, it was, those guys were definitely living the high life at that point in time.
Ed, in Joey's book, did he ever mention the thing about Ella Grasso when he got suspended?
It wasn't Ella, it was the mayor of Hartford, Ann Usello.
Ann Usello, yeah.
Dumb broad thing.
Yes.
I think he does make
She's still a
allusions to
broad.
it, but yeah, he did touch on it.
He did. She's
But
still
not
a
a great-
dumb broad.
Yeah.
I was surprised to learn that she only died last year. I
Yeah.
thought she was long gone when they named the street after her.
Yeah.
And how stupid was that? They changed the name of Ann Street to Ann Usello Street, making them change all the maps instead of just putting a plaque up there saying Ann Street is named in honor of Ann Usello and leave it alone.
Yeah.
Governmentally, it's government.
Yeah, well, I remember Joey had a lot of fun with that. We had him on the air at POP back in the '90s when he was doing overnights there, and I had a chance to talk to him, and the first thing out of his mouth was, "Still think she's a dumb broad." What I understand from what I also heard was that when he did finally get on, when he went on to IBG, of course, Buckley Station, the first time he cracked the mic on there, he said, "I still think she's a dumb broad." You know, he just wanted to have another shot at it.
Of course, when he started at Wibbage, they were using a Paul Drew Drake format, and it just didn't fit. Joey and a Drake format going together, just didn't make it.
Yeah.
But you're right, he did make the Ann Usello remark there.
As long as we're dancing around the world of WPOP, TJ Lambert just joined us. Hi, TJ.
Hey guys, how we doing?
Hey, good.
So thanks to Kenny and to Bill Winters, I ended up in Hartford. That's a true story.
Wow.
They turned me on to Paiva, and Paiva hired me. So thankful to those guys. I wanted to jump on. Hey, I'm going to the NAB in Vegas. If anybody on the call is going to be out there, I'll be around. So
TJ,
I don't know if anybody's going.
We were wondering, talking to Tracy Carmen earlier, if there may be a way, maybe through the Broadcasters Foundation of America, is there a way to let people in the industry know that Tracy does collect all of these jingles and stuff, so people would know, especially with what the Broadcasters Foundation is all about? You know, if somebody's losing someone that was formerly in the business, that they would know what to do with those treasures and get them off or give them Tracy's info.
I would think that would be an easy thing to alert them to. That would be pretty easy. And I'm working to get Deborah Norville, Scott Herman, Dan Mason, and a couple other folks to join us on one of the calls. So a lot of these board members are, well known, and they can preach better than I can. I assure you of that.
One of the things I said, TJ, was if you do find someone like that, just see what Friday is convenient for them, and we can pencil them in if for some reason they can't make it. But at least that way, instead of just sometime in the future, we could tell them, is there a good Friday that would work for you? A good Friday. But if there whatever works for them, we could do that.
Well, I mean, I think that they would want to be. They'd be happy to come on. It's not like breaking an arm or anything. It is just, hey, you guys got an hour available or 30 minutes available. So I'll get some of them, and they've got great broadcasting stories. Certainly Dan Mason does, and Scott Herman does. Deborah's got fabulous TV stories. So, and they are all board members of the broadcasters, so they'll be happy to share some inside knowledge. In fact, Scott's the chairman. Dan is the former chairman. So those guys are well invested.
And do they do like some sort of a newsletter or something on a regular basis?
Yes, they do. They absolutely do.
So
what I'll do, and Steve, I'll send a note to Tim McCarthy and Peter Doyle, and I'll copy you, and you can tell them what you're thinking about.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. That'd be good. Tracy, would that be helpful, or are we going to overwhelm you, or what?
I don't think it'd be overwhelming. I think it'd be great before, again, as I said earlier, before some of these archives are lost to the sands of time in a dumpster somewhere. That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
It's just a way to, as I was saying earlier, TJ, doesn't mean, anything other than the fact you're putting them somewhere versus throwing them out somewhere. You don't, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
but even if they're in a warehouse and they never come back again, at least from a family standpoint, you don't feel like you're just taking, your relative's work and just tossing it away like it never happened or never mattered.
Yeah, sure enough.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh yeah, easy to do.
So TJ, what else is happening in your world?
Not a thing. Other than the fact that we were also part of big wind I've never seen. Here, I mean, gusts to 70 miles an hour. And so here on the ranch, it was keeping things kind of battened down and all that kind of stuff. So, and then the other day, I've mentioned before that my adopted son is an EMT in volunteer fire department. So one of the days it's blowing like hell, and he sends a text. He said, "Structure fire near us," and they were there from 2 p.m. until midnight, and we were all watching in case we had to evacuate because we're up in the mountains and a lot of forest and national forest, and they're very close to that. So that was the kind of wind scare that we had. But that, other than that, I'm just doing what I always do, just working on the farm and playing some golf.
Ted, if your ears were burning, it's because Ted Dallacou and the judge and I had lunch together yesterday, and your name came up. Let's just say it.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, fondly.
Oh my goodness.
We
well,
had some
just talking about the good old days,
Oh man, they were some good old days, fellas.
some memories of mutual acquaintances, let's say.
Oh boy. Well, and Lee and Hal, I sent you the latest video from Doug Track, the Grease Man, and it was like reliving a morning show in Hartford. It was an amazing.
That was probably how your name first came up, because we were just saying we should try to get Grease to come on this thing.
He would take over the entire show. We can all just sit back and laugh.
Oh, we got to get it. That'd be
where is he now, TJ?
He's living
he's gone.
No.
Grease is living in the DC area, I think.
Yeah.
DC, yeah.
Pretty sure. Yeah, still.
Yeah, he's off the air, but he's definitely alive.
He'll do it on DougTrack.com. All of a sudden, he'll show up. And the latest one, honest to God, I was just sitting there laughing because it was just pure Doug. Unbelievable. So funny.
Yeah, somebody
all the reasons why he won't do a podcast. So Jim, that would probably you should get a copy of it from Lee or somebody and watch it, because all the reasons why he won't do a podcast. And honest to God, it's so clever and so funny and so off the top of his head. It certainly not scripted, just beautiful work.
That's the thing that I think people who listen to him would find so hard to believe. He never worked off a script. Everything he did, it sounded like it was like prepared weeks in advance. Everything he did was straight off the top of his head.
Yeah, it could have been anything. Somebody calling, somebody walking in, something he saw on the way to the just amazing. And it was amazing to be in a studio with him and watch him.
I just remember one thing I remember from him. This is back when Gaylord Perry was still pitching in Major League Baseball, and Gaylord Perry was famous for throwing a spitball.
He was.
And,
Oh yeah.
And the Grease Man's going on about this. Apparently he got he got in some trouble. He got caught throwing a spitter, and Grease says, "I ain't the neatest guy in the world, but I don't go spitting on the equipment."
There's one of my sports stories was Gaylord Perry. They had on Tuesday mornings, they would do a batting practice for partners and advertisers and broadcast partners and that at the baseball all-star game. So you would take batting practice, infield practice. Then you'd go to the bullpen and there'd be a pitcher down there, and he would show you how to throw. And Gaylord Perry was there, and everybody would know, how do you throw a spitter? He said, I don't know what you're talking about.
There's on YouTube, there's a thing of Grease doing the salesman comes in, wants to change copy on a spot. I mean, that is funny as hell.
Oh God.
Yeah,
just
that
amazing.
never happens.
He used to record fake commercials and put them on a cart and we put them in the sales office, and guys would play them all the time. They'd go in and play these spots, and the most famous one, and I know Lee and Hal remember, was crap clippers.
Crap
How
clippers.
to clip your dingleberries. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
It's so true that with the article from Inside Radio that Jim Levin set out earlier this week. What you're talking about here is that's the saving grace of what's going on with radio, because it's all about personality, and it's unfortunate that all these multi-billion-dollar corporations are trying their best to get rid of the only thing that could possibly keep them on the air.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen. But of course, I live in Albuquerque, and there was an old rock jock that thought that talk radio was easy, and he's got this talk radio show, and he found out and still doesn't know that it's easy. It sucks, but it's not easy.
I think TJ, the reason that talk radio was so successful, or has been so successful, especially when Rush came in and got everybody's attention on it, because Rush could pull off an hour of talk. But most of these other guys, they don't have personality. They don't have the other than Jim Harrington. They don't have anything that keeps you smiling. And a lot of these talk show hosts, they're okay, but if you gave them like 6 or 8 records an hour, they could be really good. You just can't talk that long.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
Traditionally,
Steve Goldstein just posted on his newsletter, because he had an anniversary when he left Saga. He actually was one of the first guys to recognize how important podcasts were going to be, and he talks about that they're not easy too. And a lot of guys do podcasts. All they do is clips of their show, which is about as exciting as a popcorn fart. So. That's hard. That's hard work, man. That is hard work. And anybody that does a really good podcast and they do it regularly, hats off to them, man. That is really hard work.
And we got Jim Harrington does one every single day.
Yep. That's hard work, Jimmy. That is hard work, brother.
Keeps me out of traffic. It is hard work, but it's fun. I kind of do it like a mental exercise, because otherwise when you're retired, it's like you get lazy, and I'm already fat, but I mean, you get lazy, and I think it's like a muscle. You got to keep thinking, keep active. I sure as heck don't do it for the money, because there's not a lot of money, unless you're somebody like Rogan. What's his name? Yeah, Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got a $100 million contract with Spotify,
and he was making millions before that.
Yeah, but you do it because it's fun. There's a party. It's like how you got into radio when you were a kid. You didn't make any money then either. It's like it's a cycle, guys. You start out making no money, and you end up making no money.
Yeah,
it's in between. You make no money.
Yeah, and I think it's mental gymnastics, man. Every time I listen to one when I'm in the car, I'm like, holy crap, is that good? That's really clever and really good and well thought out and well prepped. And guys on the air now read a card.
Jim, your partner Bill, is he an old radio guy as well?
Yeah. He worked in a bunch of stations in Pittsburgh, and worked in down in Raleigh, and some stations in the South. A 50,000 watt station in Louisiana, I think.
You ought to get him on here some week. It would be interesting to hear how you guys go about putting together.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, good idea, Ed.
Okay, well, I'll make the suggestion tomorrow.
Well, you already got him on the air before you come here, so maybe just hang on to him a little bit longer. See if he'll stay. But Jim,
you were talking about work. I mean, some people say, when do you do it? I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. It's like doing a morning show, and I'll spend an hour and a half doing show prep or getting audio clips together, and like producing a show, and then we do an hour, sometimes an hour and a half of talk. And if you took that hour and a half and put commercials in it, it would be like a 3-hour show, So you're right. It isn't for everybody. And you can hear it, by the way. A lot of people get into it thinking it's going to be glamorous and fun. They hate it after about a week and they get out of it. So.
Hey, Jim, I got a friend that has an agency that does all their work and buys and all that kind of stuff for podcasts.
Really?
So I do. So you know what? I'll grab your email and introduce you to Spencer Brown.
Yeah, Jim,
excellent.
You might as
Spencer
well
Brown.
make some money on this, especially if somebody can kind of carry it for you and and put it in there and let them do the work and you get your cut of that.
Yeah, and they rep podcasts too, so it may work out really well.
That'd be great. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah. How many?
Oh yeah, for sure.
How many people, Jim? I mean, I know you don't like to be braggadocious, but after doing this, how long has it been on the? Have you been doing a podcast, Jim?
We started our 4th year on December 16th.
And
wow,
it's longer than I worked in some radio station. A lot of radio stations.
How many downloads are you getting now, Jim?
Well, it depends upon. Well, they say 4 million a week.
Wow.
But that's globally, guys. You have to understand it's not like not like in just one market or the U.S. I mean, we have listeners in Ukraine. It gets me a little nervous about that. Ukraine, Germany, England, France.
You're
New
big
Zealand,
in North Korea,
Australia.
Jim. You're big in North Korea.
They don't have the power to run the podcast over there. So, no, I mean it's kind of mind-boggling when you realize the reach of the internet, of what you do. But and that's one of the reasons why you keep doing it, because you think, well, there's a lot of people out there listening, so, but who knows?
Well, that's the nice thing about podcasts, Jim, is that you can actually get some information that tells you that those people are there.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I mean, with radio, I mean, not ratings, but it's not like really, tangible. I mean, when we used to do stuff, when Ron and I did stuff, when I think, there was, I don't know, Spotify, whatever, when you do Pandora, they have to give you accountability, right, Ron? I mean, they've got to be able, if you tell Pandora you want to hit so many and so many demos, they have to show you, right?
Yeah, well, again, if you're buying, it all depends on, like you're saying, downloads. Well, somebody's not going to buy 4 million downloads, Jim, but they might want to buy, they might want to buy, 100,000 downloads in Des Moines, Iowa.
Yep.
Or something like that. So they geo target. I mean, that's the beauty of a podcast being digital. You can buy it in so many different ways. The fact that you have that kind of critical mass and what TJ is saying is true. I mean, I don't know, TJ, you deal with Wondery. Is that the company you're talking about?
No, Legion 13.
Okay, there's a bunch of huge. I mean, Wondery is huge. They've been producing podcasts and doing buys and sell. With Steve and I were dealing with them back at the CRN days back in 2014, 2015, before CRN actually started producing podcasts. And CRN produced a few. There's 2 million podcasts out there. 99% of them don't have a hill of beans in terms of critical mass. But Jim, you got 4 million downloads a week. It doesn't matter where they are. That's huge. And you're right. We said this over and over again. That you can monetize that for sure.
Yeah. Hey, Ron, another when you were talking about Live and Kicking, when I was running promotion at Casablanca, I worked with Donna and really got to know her.
Probably
and
knew
was
Bruce
a great friend.
Sanano.
I know Bruce so well; it's unbelievable.
I got to mention that to him. I'm in touch with Bruce all the time. He's got he's got a nice career going.
Tell him I send my best. He is so
TJ,
awesome.
I will. He's after Donna's died, he kind of was a little bit lost. But Bruce always was a songwriter, and now he's got a real career going with his being Bruce Sanano, and he's out there. And his daughter is Johnny Swim. I'm sure you know who that is. Yep. And his other daughter, Brooklyn Sanano, is a pretty well-known actress. But Bruce at age 76 is steamrolling right along. He's doing great.
Is he still living in Nashville?
He lives in part-time in LA and part in Milan, Italy. He remarried an Italian girl, and Bruce is being Italian.
Oh, nice.
He lives in about half the year in Milan and half the year in Los Angeles. And I think Los Angeles because that's where his kids are. And he wants to be around him. I don't think he has property in Nashville anymore.
Yeah, well, I met him when he was with Brooklyn Dreams, and that's how we met Donna. And then when Donna got divorced, and then Bruce, and when they did Heaven Knows, that was the start of the romance.
So you know, the lead singer in that, the other lead singer is a guy named Joe Esposito. I don't know if you know Joe, but
absolutely, I know all those guys.
Joe is the lead singer now in the Brooklyn Bridge, and the other guy who was in that group was a guy named Eddie Hoganson. I don't know if Eddie. We all grew up together. I grew up with those guys in Brooklyn in the 60s. They had a group. Their original group was called the Movements. It was Joe, Eddie, and Eddie's brother, who sadly died, Butch Hoganson, and two other guys, and they had a great Temptations-like singing group. These guys were phenomenal.
Yep.
But Joe Esposito is an amazing talent.
And
amazing talent.
Joey sound like what's his name that was Doobie Brothers lead singer?
Michael McDonald.
Yeah, he sounded an awful lot like Mom.
Sure.
Yeah. So
that was funny. The other day, I bumped into a guy, and I'm not that. We got to have you on TIC with me, Ryan, because everybody remembers that song. I said that to somebody. He goes, "Are you kidding me? Alive and Kicking?" And he started talking about Brooklyn, and I mentioned he talked about a club there. Because there's been so many incarnations of that group.
Yeah. TJ, you mentioned Brooklyn Dreams. After Alive and Kicking broke up in the early 70s, Bruce moved out to California with Joe and Eddie, and that's how Brooklyn Dreams started. Those guys sang together, and then Casablanca, and of course that's where he met Donna Summer, and they were married for 32 years. But those guys were talented.
Yeah, last time I saw him was at in Boston at an all-star game. They did a concert. That was and Donna did a concert, and Bruce was doing all the board work and played in the band and all that. So
he did. Yeah, he sure did.
Yep.
All right, guys. Now this is what we're gonna do. I got to get out of here right now. But again, you guys are welcome to stay. It's just that Dave's gonna have a canary if I don't. Got to edit through. I don't think there's a lot to edit here, but I think this has been terrific, and I just want to go through this. And if I do miss anybody, there's been such a great group here today, and I want to thank Pete Salant and Tracy Carmen, Bill Rock, Ted Dalaku, Ed Bruder, Ron Pell, Bob Craig, Dave Nagel, Judge Harrigan, Bob Marks, John Landry, Russ Oasis, T.J. Lambert, Jim Harrington, Terry Woods, Lee Gordon, Bob Marks. Yes, I put Russ Oasis up there twice because he really impressed me. Did I get everybody?
That way he knows Chuck $40.
Hopefully I covered everybody. He's holding up that $20 again. All right. And don't forget, especially with TJ being here, we thank him for introducing us to the Broadcasters Foundation of America. Please check out their website. If you ever need any help, you're down on your luck, you need somebody to know that you're not alone out there, that your broadcasting brothers and sisters are always there for you. So you go to Broadcasters Foundation of America, and if you get a few extra bucks and you want to tell somebody to pass it around, please do that, because they're a great organization, and I know that firsthand from some people that are here that they've helped them out too. So thanks a lot. That'll do it for this edition of Radio Friends. Again, I'm Steve Parker here in Berlin, Connecticut, and we'll catch you next time.
Your friends, Radio Friends again. Radio Friends again.